So imagine this. By the time you reach your mid-30s, roughly 95% of who you consider yourself to be, your quirks, your specific brand of anxiety, your personality traits, isn't actually you.
Right. It's more like a highly efficient biological computer program, just running entirely on autopilot.
Exactly. I mean, we all walk around out there thinking we're making these conscious choices every day. But in reality, we are just executing deeply memorized habits.
Yeah, we're basically asleep at the wheel, for most of our day.
It's terrifying, honestly.
Oh,
But that's exactly what we're tackling today in this deep dive. We are looking at the hard science of how to break into that biological operating system and, well, fundamentally rewrite the code.
and we're basing this on a really fascinating stack of research, case studies, and clinical observations from Dr. Joe Dispenza's work in his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah, because the goal here isn't just to sit around talking about abstract philosophy, right? We really want to demystify the mystical for you.
Absolutely. We want to look at the exact biological and neurological mechanisms that dictate how your brain and body build these automatic programs in the first place.
Right, and more importantly, we're going to go over the step-by-step meditative process you need to physically dismantle them. But before we get into the how-to, we really need to ground this in some hard evidence.
Yeah, we definitely have to start with the physiology, because shifting from the theoretical to the highly practical requires looking at concrete data right out of the gate.
Which brings us to the foreword of our source material, written by Dr. Daniel Amen.
Right. He's a very prominent psychiatrist and brain imaging expert. And he provides some incredible context here. He's looking at this phenomenon not through some self-help lens, but through actual functional neuroimaging.
Uses SPECT scans, right?
Yes, exactly. SPECT scans, which measures cerebral blood flow and activity patterns in the brain.
Because, I mean, if we're sitting here claiming that you can literally think a new reality into existence, we kind of need to see the receipts. Like, what are those scans actually showing us?
Well, they're showing physical, structural changes in the brain's hardware. And these changes are based entirely on internal mental exercises.
That is wild. Just from thinking.
Just from a very specific, structured daily meditation practice. It's the exact kind of meditation we are going to break down for you later in this deep dive.
Okay, so what happened to the patients doing this?
So after just 8 weeks of this daily practice, Dr. Amen found that the patient's SPECT scans revealed significantly stronger blood flow to the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex, that's the part right behind your forehead, right? The executive function area.
Exactly. It's the seat of complex planning, focus, and conscious decision-making.
So wait, they aren't just reporting that they feel calmer. Their brains are literally, physically reallocating resources to the areas responsible for conscious awareness.
Yes, exactly. And the scans showed this enhanced blood flow, not just while they were actively meditating, but at baseline rest.
Oh, wow. So their default state changed.
Right. They essentially upgraded their default neural hardware. The data showed their memories improved, their cognitive flexibility increased, and, their ability to regulate emotional responses was vastly enhanced.
So when we talk about changing your reality, we are literally talking about optimizing blood flow, synaptic connections in the neurochemistry of the brain.
We are. It's an actual hardware upgrade.
Well, let's dive straight into what makes that upgrade so difficult for most of us.
Yeah.
Which brings us right back to that terrifying statistic I mentioned at the top, the 95% problem.
Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow. The psychologists in these sources point out that by age 35, 95% of our identity is just a set of involuntary programs.
Memorized behaviors, conditioned emotional responses, habitual thoughts. I mean, it implies that for 95% of our day, we only appear to be awake.
Right. We are essentially unconscious. We're just letting old programming drive the car.
So how does that happen? Like, mechanically?
To understand the mechanics, we have to look at the biology of emotion and how memories are consolidated. You see, the brain is an incredibly energy-intensive organ.
It burns a lot of calories, yeah.
It does. So because of that, it is obsessed with efficiency. It really doesn't want to expend conscious energy on something it has already done 1,000 times before.
So it offloads the process.
Exactly. It offloads it to the subconscious. Let's trace the actual pathway here. It all starts with a conscious thought.
Okay, so I have a thought about something.
Right. You have a thought about an event, and that thought triggers a specific neural network in your brain to fire. As those neurons fire, the brain releases corresponding chemical messengers called neuropeptides.
The neuropeptides, okay.
These peptides travel through the bloodstream and dock onto the receptor sites on the cells of your body.
So the thought literally creates a chemical signature.
Yes, and that chemical signature is what we experience as an emotion.
Okay, I follow.
Now, if you repeat this process, say, you have a chronic, stressful thought about your finances every single morning while you're making coffee.
A very relatable example for a lot of people, yeah.
Right. Well, you are repeatedly flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline, and according to Hebb's law, neurons that fire together wire together.
So the brain gets better at being stressed.
Exactly. The neural network in the brain becomes highly optimized for that specific stress thought, and simultaneously, the body becomes highly efficient at receiving those stress chemicals.
So over time, the thought, the memory of the financial issue, and the emotion of stress all just sort of merge into one seamless, instantaneous experience.
Right. You essentially memorize the emotion to the point where the conscious thought isn't even really required anymore.
That makes me think of the analogy of walking through a really dense forest. Like the first time you bushwhack a trail, it takes immense effort and conscious focus. Right?
Yeah, you're hacking away at the brush.
Exactly. That's like the first time you learn a new skill or have a new emotional reaction. But if you walk that exact same path every single day for 10 years, you trample down the grass, you clear the brush, and eventually that path gets paved into a literal superhighway.
That's a perfect analogy, and the brain does this biologically through a process called myelination.
Oh, right. It wraps the frequently used neural circuits in a fatty sheath.
Exactly. It wraps them in myelin, so the electrical signal travels faster and with far less resistance. It's the exact biological mechanism of your forest trail superhighway.
And because the signal travels so incredibly fast on that superhighway, the conscious mind doesn't even have time to intervene.
No, it doesn't. The body receives the chemical signal before you are even fully aware of the thought that triggered it. This is what the sources mean when they say the body actually memorizes the emotional state better than the conscious mind does.
The body literally knows how to be stressed out better than the brain does. It's like learning the procedural memory of riding a bike, but applied to victimization or anger.
Right. And when the body knows how to do something better than the conscious mind, the body fundamentally becomes the mind. The subconscious physiology just takes over the executive function.
The body becomes the mind.
Yeah.
That phrasing is so critical to this whole deep dive. If I try to map this out mechanically, it's like you have an operating system on a laptop.
Okay,
right?
yeah, let's look at that.
Let's say you're consciously trying to type an email. That's your 5% conscious mind saying, I want to be happy today. I want to be productive.
Right, your intention.
But in the background, the operating system is running a dozen heavily encoded auto-launching programs. And these programs are throwing up pop-up windows of anxiety, spinning the cooling fan out of control with adrenaline, and just draining the battery with chronic cortisol release.
That's a great way to visualize it.
And you can sit there and yell at the screen, stop being anxious. But the hardware doesn't respond to the screen. It responds to the code.
It doesn't register the conscious command because the conscious command isn't speaking the language of the automated operating system. Your conscious mind is operating up in the prefrontal cortex, but your memorized emotional states are deeply embedded in the limbic system and the body's autonomic nervous system.
So your conscious mind wants one thing, but your biology is aggressively addicted to something entirely different.
Exactly. And the sources dig deeply into the physical consequences of running this rogue operating system for decades. This is where we get into the fascinating world of epigenetics.
Yeah, because it's not just that you feel bad emotionally. It's that this loop physically degrades your cellular machinery, right?
Yes. The emerging science of epigenetics completely flips the old Darwinian model that our genes are just our fixed destiny.
Like you're born with a blueprint, and that's just what you get.
Right. We used to think of genes as fixed blueprints, but we now know they are more like possibilities or potentials. Epigenetics, which literally means above the gene, shows us that the environment signals the gene.
Okay, but what environment? My living room.
Well, eventually, yes. But the most immediate environment for a single cell inside your body is the chemical state of your blood.
So the neuropeptides we were talking about earlier, the cortisol and the adrenaline produced by our chronic thoughts, those are the environmental signals telling the genes what to do.
Precisely. When those peptides dock onto a cell, they initiate a cascade of events that reaches all the way into the cell's nucleus, where the DNA actually resides.
And it changes the DNA.
It doesn't alter the underlying sequence. It involves processes like DNA methylation, where chemical tags attach to the DNA molecule and physically change how the gene is expressed.
It turns the volume up or down on certain genetic instructions.
Exactly. It changes how the DNA is read. And this is crucial because genes are responsible for making proteins, and proteins are the fundamental building blocks of the body.
Right, like your immune system, your digestion, tissue repair, all of it relies on synthesizing specific proteins.
But the biological system cannot handle the allostatic load of chronic emergency. If you signal the exact same genes with the exact same stress chemistry for 20 years, the constant demand physically wears out the genetic machinery.
The text mentions that the cells start producing cheaper proteins, which, is such a visceral way to describe aging.
It really is. It's biological degradation. When the genetic transcription process is constantly under the duress of cortisol, errors occur in the mRNA translation.
So the proteins being synthesized are quite literally of a lower quality.
Yes. The sources use physical aging as the prime example here. Why does our skin sag? Because the collagen and elastin, which are proteins, come to be made of cheaper, degraded materials.
Wow.
Why do muscles atrophy? Because the actin and myosin proteins degrade in quality. The continuous chemical barrage from a memorized state of survival breaks down the physical structure of the body.
So by staying stuck in an emotional loop of resentment or anxiety, we are actively instructing our DNA to build a flimsier, cheaper version of our physical body.
Yes.
We are literally aging ourselves on purpose without even knowing it.
You are signaling the genes of disease and decay because you are trapped in a biological past.
Okay, so if our subconscious body has hijacked the mind and it's busy degrading our genetic expression, what keeps hitting play on this toxic program? Why don't we just, snap out of it?
That brings us to what the text identifies as the big three barriers to change.
Right. Environment, body, and time. Let's tackle these one by one because this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's start with environment. How does my external environment, my house, my commute, my office, keep my internal biology locked in the past?
It all comes down to neurological association. We use our external world to remember who we are.
What do you mean by that?
Every person you know, every place you visit, every single object you interact with has a specific neurological network assigned to it in your brain. And that network is tied to a specific emotional memory.
Oh, I see. So when I wake up and look around my bedroom, my brain fires the bedroom network, which instantly triggers the baseline chemical state I always feel when I wake up.
Right. You open your eyes, you see your partner, you fire a network, you grab your phone, you fire a network, you drive the exact same route to work, you see the same coworkers.
You're just on a track.
You are allowing your external environment to entirely dictate your internal neurochemical state. You are simply reacting to the familiar.
And if you're reacting to the familiar, you're just collapsing the field of possibilities into the exact same predictable reality day after day. You're using the external world to reaffirm your identity.
Exactly. And there is a very candid anecdote in the sources from Dr. Joe Dispenza himself about his own struggle with this.
Yeah, he talks about hitting a major wall in his life where he realized he was completely dependent on his environment to maintain his personality.
Right, he was traveling the world, giving all these lectures, and he realized he literally needed the audience, the airports, the recognition of being Joe the expert just to feel normal.
Which is pretty brave to admit.
Yeah.
He realized that without those external cues, without the people treating him a certain way, he actually didn't know who he was underneath it all.
It's a profound level of self-awareness regarding external dependency. He recognized that his internal state of happiness or fulfillment was completely conditional.
It was a reaction to the environment, rather than a self-generated state of being. The environment was the trigger for the neurochemical fix.
Which is a perfect segue into barrier number 2, the body. Specifically, the concept that the body becomes chemically addicted to its own problem.
Okay, yes. The text argues that we hold on to our bad jobs, our terrible relationships, and our unfavorable circumstances because we are actually addicted to the emotions they produce.
It's a heavy concept.
It really is, and I want to push back on this a bit, or at least chew on it. Because if you say this to someone who is in a deeply toxic or abusive situation, it sounds incredibly dismissive.
It does. It can border on victim blaming if not explained correctly.
Right. Like, are we genuinely saying that someone suffering in a terrible workplace is choosing to stay because they are a junkie for their own misery?
It is a vital distinction to make, and we really need to separate the conscious desire for safety from the biological reality of allostatic load.
Okay, unpack that for me.
You're not saying the conscious person wants to be abused or likes the toxic job. Consciously, they likely hate it and desperately want out. But we have to look at what the body, the subconscious mind, is doing.
The operating system running in the background.
Yes. When you are in a highly stressful environment, your body activates the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
The fight or flight system.
Exactly. It floods your system with adrenaline and cortisol. It's a survival mechanism designed to give you a massive rush of energy to fight or flee.
But if you can't fight and you can't flee because it's your boss or your spouse, you just sit there and steep in those chemicals.
Right. And over time, the body's baseline shifts. The body is always seeking homeostasis or balance. If the environment demands high cortisol every single day, the body starts to downregulate its own natural state to accommodate that massive chemical flood.
So it changes its structure.
Literally. The cells divide and create new cells with more receptor sites for cortisol and fewer receptor sites for serotonin or dopamine.
Wow.
The body physically alters its structure to become a highly efficient receptacle for stress chemistry.
So the addiction isn't to the suffering itself. The addiction is to the predictability of the neurochemical rush.
Predictability is safety to the primitive brain. Even if the state is totally miserable, the body knows exactly how to metabolize it. We use the toxic boss or the bad relationship to stimulate our brain's chemistry because it makes us feel intensely alive.
It gives us a rush of energy and it reaffirms our identity. We know who we are when we're fighting that battle.
Exactly. And consider what happens if that person finally quits the toxic job.
Right, they go into chemical withdrawal.
Yes. The conscious mind says, thank God I'm out of there, I can finally relax. But the body, which now has more cortisol receptors than it knows what to do with, suddenly isn't getting its daily hit.
The body's like, wait, where's my fuel?
Exactly. The body sends urgent signals to the brain saying, we are out of balance. Find a reason to feel stressed.
So the person starts obsessing over minor things at the new job, or they subconsciously seek out a new toxic dynamic, or they just recreate the drama in their personal life.
The body literally forces the mind to find a new environmental trigger to produce the familiar chemical state.
The body demands the fix, and the conscious mind just rationalizes the behavior to get it. That is terrifying, but it perfectly explains why people end up in the exact same patterns over and over again.
It really does.
Okay, so we have the environment triggering the body's addiction. What about barrier number 3? Time.
The barrier of time refers to our profound inability to inhabit the present moment. Because of the biological loops we just discussed, the vast majority of people spend their entire lives oscillating between living in the emotional past and anticipating a predictable future based on that exact past.
The sources map out this timeline of how a single event morphs into a lifelong biological state.
Yeah, let's walk through that.
Okay, it starts with a simple experience. Let's say you're driving to work and someone aggressively cuts you off, almost causing an accident.
Right, that event triggers the HPA axis. You get the adrenaline spike, your heart rate increases. That is an emotional reaction. It is designed to last for a few minutes to ensure your survival.
But humans have this unique ability to keep the stress response turned on just by thinking about the event.
We can turn on the stress response by thought alone. If you get to work and spend the next 4 hours seething about the driver, replaying the event in your mind, you are maintaining that chemical state.
So the emotional reaction extends into a mood. You are now just in a bad mood.
And if you keep that mood going for weeks,
the refractory period of the emotion lengthens. The body's baseline continues to shift. The mood becomes a temperament. People start to view you as just a generally irritable person.
And if you sustain that temperament for years,
it hardwires into a personality trait. You become a resentful, bitter person. And the initial trigger, the driver who cut you off, is literally years in the past.
But your biology is still living in the exact chemical state of that morning. You have conditioned your body to live entirely in the past.
And if your biology is living in the past, your brain will only project a future that looks exactly like that past. You lose the ability to even conceive of a new possibility.
So the big three act as a self-sealing biological trap. The environment triggers the body craves the chemical past, and the perception of time is locked into a loop.
And when people start to vaguely realize they're caught in this trap, when they feel that chronic emptiness or anxiety or dissatisfaction, it's human nature to try to escape. But the text argues that our default method for escaping actually deepens the biological addiction.
Yes. This leads right into the discussion around the gap, the identity gap.
Right. The gap is defined as this vast, often really painful space between how we actually feel on the inside, empty, fearful, inadequate, and the curated projection we present to the external world to survive and be accepted.
It is the ultimate cognitive dissonance. We expend massive amounts of biological energy maintaining the facade, but eventually the internal emptiness becomes way too loud to ignore.
And society has provided us with a very specific, externally driven model for trying to close that gap.
We try to consume our way out of a biological problem.
This is the classic midlife crisis paradigm, isn't it? You feel empty and insignificant, so you go out and buy a bright red sports car.
Exactly. We use the external environment to try and force a chemical change in the internal environment. We think, if I acquire this object, or change my physical appearance, or travel to this exotic location, the external novelty will change my internal state of being.
And the really insidious part is, it does actually work. But only for a minute.
It works because novelty triggers the brain's reward centers. When you buy the sports car, you get a massive spike of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. You feel a rush of pleasure and excitement.
So for a brief moment, the internal emptiness is masked by the chemical high. The gap appears to close.
But then we run right back into the same biological problem we talked about earlier: homeostasis and receptor downregulation.
Right, hedonic adaptation.
Exactly. The brain cannot sustain that massive level of dopamine without damaging the system, so it prunes back the dopamine receptors to handle the flood.
So the sports car isn't novel anymore, it's just your car. You drive it to the same job, park it in the same garage, and the dopamine spike flatlines.
And when the high wears off, the internal emptiness is still sitting there waiting for you. But the text points out that the gap hasn't just remained the same. Using the external world to fix it actually widens the gap.
Wait, why does it get worse?
Because you have reinforced the neurological dependency on the external world. You have trained your brain that the only way to alleviate the internal pain is to consume something outside of yourself.
Oh, I see.
And because your dopamine receptors have downregulated, the next time you feel the emptiness, you need a significantly larger stimulus just to reach the same baseline level of relief.
So the sports car doesn't work anymore, so now you need a bigger house or a new spouse.
Or you escalate into true material addictions. This is the exact neurobiological root of compulsive shopping, pathological gambling, substance abuse, and excessive gaming.
The individual is desperately trying to manipulate their external environment to get a chemical hit big enough to drown out the internal reality.
But it is an unwinnable biological arms race. The more you rely on the outer world, the wider the gap becomes and the more fractured your identity gets.
So if the external fixes are a complete illusion, and we can't buy or travel our way out of the 95% autopilot, we have no choice but to turn inward. We have to learn how to manipulate our own biology without relying on the environment.
We need a hardware upgrade.
Which brings us to the core methodology of the text, utilizing the three functional brains to move from thinking to doing to being.
Yes, let's break down this neuroanatomy. It really helps demystify the process when we look at the specific brain regions involved.
Yeah, I think getting specific here is super helpful. The first step is thinking, which relies on the neocortex, right?
Correct. The neocortex is the evolutionarily newest part of the human brain. It is the seat of our conscious awareness, our spatial reasoning, our language, and our executive function.
So it's basically the CEO of the brain.
Exactly. When we read a book, process a new concept, or, listen to an expansive deep dive like this one, we're using the neocortex to gather knowledge.
It's the architect. It allows us to hold a vision of something that doesn't exist yet.
Yes. The neocortex allows for mental rehearsal. It lets you detach from your current environment and consciously piece together a new model of reality based on the knowledge you've acquired.
However, the critical flaw for most people is that they stop right here.
Right.
I mean, I can read 50 books on empathy, and my neocortex can perfectly articulate the philosophy of empathy. But that intellectual knowledge doesn't automatically make me an empathetic person when I'm, say, cut off in traffic.
Because intellectual knowledge is just stored data in the neocortex. It hasn't penetrated the automated operating system yet. To move from thinking to doing, you have to engage the second brain.
The limbic system.
Yes, the limbic system. It is situated beneath the neocortex, and it is responsible for generating those neuropeptides we discussed earlier.
It's the emotional center, the chemical factory.
Exactly. For a thought in the neocortex to actually alter your biology, it must be translated into an experience, and that experience must generate an emotion.
So when you apply the knowledge you learned, when you actively choose to react with empathy in a frustrating situation, you engage the limbic brain.
Right. And the limbic system releases a new blend of peptides that washes over the body.
The thinking brain turns on the feeling brain.
Yes. You are literally instructing the body chemically on what the mind has understood intellectually. You are beginning to align the hardware and the software.
But the ultimate goal isn't just to do the new behavior consciously,
Right.
because that still requires effort.
Right. The goal is the final stage, being. And that requires the third brain, the cerebellum.
The cerebellum, that's the base of the skull, right?
Yes. And it is the brain's microprocessor for procedural memory and automated states of being. It is where all those subconscious programs are stored.
This is the hard drive where the 95% autopilot lives.
Precisely. When the mind and body work together repeatedly, when you use the neocortex to hold the intention and the limbic system to generate the corresponding emotion, the cerebellum eventually memorizes this new neurochemical pattern.
It encodes it as a non-declarative implicit memory.
Yes. It becomes just as automatic as the old stress response. You no longer have to try to be empathetic. You don't have to consciously think about it.
It has just become your innate state of being. You have successfully uninstalled the old program and installed a new one.
And the sources point out the massive implication of reaching this state of being. When you achieve this, you are altering yourself neurologically, chemically, and genetically ahead of the actual real-world experience finding you.
We really need to emphasize this point, because it subverts our fundamental understanding of cause and effect.
It completely flips the Newtonian model.
Right. The Newtonian model of reality says we must wait for a cause in the external environment to produce an effect in our internal environment.
Yeah.
We wait for the wealth to feel abundant. We wait for the new relationship to feel loved.
But this biological model dictates that you must produce the effect internally before the cause manifests externally.
By using the neocortex, limbic system, and cerebellum to rehearse a new reality, you are physically changing your brain circuits and genetic expression to look biologically as if the future event has already happened.
You are living the future in the present moment. Your body is experiencing the reality before your senses perceive it.
And when your internal biological state consistently matches your desired future state, you stop collapsing the quantum field into the same past patterns, and you actually begin to draw new experiences to you.
Exactly.
Okay, the neuroanatomy makes a lot of sense. But the million-dollar question is, how do we actually execute this? Like, how do you and I sit down in our living rooms and consciously move an idea from the neocortex down into the cerebellum?
The sources outline a very specific meditative process for this, but getting into that process requires walking through a door that most people find incredibly difficult to find.
It requires accessing what the text refers to as the quantum field.
Yes.
Now, I have to be honest here. Whenever I hear the term quantum field used in a self-help context, my immediate reaction is, well, skepticism.
That's fair. The term gets hijacked by pseudoscience constantly.
Right. The text says that to enter this field and change your reality, you have to become no body, no thing, no time. You have to become pure consciousness. So strip away the metaphor for me. What is biologically happening when we do this?
Let's ground it in brainwave states and the autonomic nervous system. When we are caught in the big three environment, body and time, we are operating in high beta brainwaves.
High beta.
Yes. This is a state of hyperarousal, sympathetic nervous system dominance, and narrow focus. We are obsessively focused on the material world, the physical body, and the ticking clock.
So we're stressed out and hyper-focused on our problems.
Right. In high beta, the brain is compartmentalized, firing incoherently. You cannot rewrite the subconscious operating system from a high beta state, because high beta is a survival mechanism. It locks down the hardware to deal with immediate threats.
It's like you can't install an update while the computer's fighting off a virus.
That is a perfect way to put it. So the meditative process begins by physically altering the brainwave state. By focusing on your breath, and then deliberately shifting your focus away from physical objects and into the space around objects, you force the brain out of high beta.
You slip into alpha and eventually theta brainwave.
Yes, this is the no body, no thing, no time transition.
Biologically, yes.
In theta, the sympathetic nervous system powers down, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system takes over. The brain moves from incoherent, localized firing to a highly synchronized, coherent state.
The neocortex quiets down, and the doorway to the subconscious limbic system and cerebellum opens up.
Exactly. You cease to be the stressed identity localized in a specific body and time. You become pure awareness operating within the coherent frequency of the brain.
Okay, that biological explanation bridges the gap for me. It's not magic. It's a very orchestrated shift in neurobiology. And there is a real-world case study in the text that demonstrates the extreme physical power of this state. Story of Jose and the warts.
Yes, a fascinating example of psychoneuroimmunology in action.
So Jose was a man who suffered from 10 olive-sized warts on his left hand. For years, he tried absolutely everything to get rid of them. He was deeply embarrassed, constantly hiding his hand in his pocket.
His entire identity, his ego, his somebody, was heavily anchored to being the guy with the disfigured hand.
Right. His environment, his body, and his emotional timeline were completely tethered to that physical reality. So one night, he decides to try this meditation. He lies down, focuses on his breath, and manages to shift his brainwaves.
He moves past his physical body, past his environment, and enters that deep, coherent theta state.
He stops being Jose with the warts. He becomes pure awareness. And the next morning, he wakes up, and all 10 warts are completely gone.
Not smaller, not healing. Gone.
He literally looked under the sheets for them because he couldn't comprehend it.
The text explains this through a quantum lens, stating that his subjective consciousness matched the objective, coherent, universal intelligence, and that intelligence did the healing.
Right. But again, let's parse out the biological mechanism from the quantum metaphor. How does entering a theta brainwave state literally erase localized tumors overnight?
This is where we look at the immune system's relationship with the autonomic nervous system. Warts are caused by a viral infection. For years, Jose was obsessing over these warts. He was living in chronic stress, embarrassment, and frustration.
And that high beta sympathetic state suppresses the immune system, right?
Exactly. The body diverts energy away from cellular repair and immune function to deal with the perceived external threat.
So his own stress about the warts was actively preventing his body from fighting the virus.
Yes. When he entered that profound meditative state, he completely dropped his allostatic load. The HPA axis quieted down, cortisol production plummeted, and his brain entered a state of massive coherence.
Which allowed the parasympathetic nervous system to fully engage.
Exactly. Without the suppression of stress hormones, his immune system, specifically T cells and macrophages, experienced a massive surge in efficacy. Given the intense coherence of his nervous system in that moment, the immune system was finally able to rapidly identify and eradicate the viral infection.
He got out of his own biological way. He stopped being the identity that was suppressing the healing. That is just incredible. So how do we systematically execute what Jose did?
Well, the text outlines a step-by-step rewiring process once you reach that meditative state.
And the first major hurdle in the meditation is what the text calls unmemorizing the emotion, right?
Yes. Before you can build the new neural architecture, you have to dismantle the old network. You have to starve the old circuits of their energetic fuel.
You have to stop thinking the thoughts that produce the stress chemistry.
It requires ruthless honesty. If you want a new reality, you have to stop participating in the behaviors and thoughts that sustain the old one.
The text is very pragmatic about this. It says, if you want to be wealthy, you have to stop doing the things that make you poor.
Right. If you want to heal, you have to stop indulging in the emotional states of sickness or victimization. You have to consciously observe the old program running and actively choose not to engage with it.
And a crucial part of dismantling the old self involves a step that the sources say terrifies most people in workshops.
Yeah.
You have to speak the truth out loud.
Yes, you have to verbally declare who you have been emotionally.
Why is vocalizing this so difficult for people, and why is it a necessary step?
It's terrifying because it requires collapsing the identity gap we talked about earlier. We spend all our energy hiding our internal flaws behind the external facade.
So to speak your hidden truths out loud, to say, I am deeply insecure and I use manipulation to feel safe, or I am addicted to feeling like a victim because it gets me attention, is to literally shatter the ego's defense mechanism. But physically, what does vocalizing it achieve? Like, why can't I just admit it in my head?
It comes down to cognitive reappraisal and breaking neurolinguistic associative loops. Every traumatic memory or habitual emotional state has an energetic charge tethering you to your past.
Okay, I'm with you.
When you keep it hidden, you empower the limbic system to maintain the subconscious fear. When you vocalize it, you bring the subconscious pattern up into the conscious neocortex. You are engaging the brain's language centers and motor cortex to externalize the internal state.
It's like turning on the lights in a dark room. The monster isn't as scary when you can clearly articulate what it is.
Exactly. By declaring it out loud, you are breaking the emotional resonance. You're severing the energetic bonds that tie your identity to the people, places, and events of your past.
You are recalling that energy back to yourself, making it available to actually build the new reality.
Right.
Okay, so you've unmemorized the old emotion. You've vocalized the truth to sever the energetic ties. You now have a blank biological canvas. How do we paint the new picture?
This requires two specific practices: redirecting and mental rehearsal.
Let's tackle redirecting first, because this is an active practice you use throughout your waking day, not just on the meditation cushion.
Right. Redirecting is the conscious intervention into the automated habit loop. As you move through your day, you will inevitably encounter environmental triggers that attempt to fire the old neural networks.
You get a stressful email, and you feel the familiar surge of anxiety starting in your chest.
Exactly. And at that precise microsecond moment, you must consciously recognize the automated program booting up, and you must literally, forcefully say, change.
Change. Now, my immediate thought is that this sounds like a cheesy positive affirmation. Just say change and everything gets better.
Yeah.
But the text argues this is a mechanical intervention. How does vocalizing one word actually stop a biological cascade?
It is not an affirmation, it is a pattern interrupt. When you say change, either out loud or forcefully in your mind, you are engaging the central executive network of the brain to override the default mode network, the DMN.
The DMN. That's where those automated, wandering, anxious thoughts live.
Right.
So you're basically hijacking the brain's processing power.
Exactly. The command change requires focused attention, which pulls energy away from the automated limbic reaction and focuses it back into the prefrontal cortex.
You are halting the action potential of the neural circuit before the neuropeptides can be fully released into the bloodstream.
And by continually interrupting the firing of that old circuit, you initiate synaptic pruning. The connections physically weaken. You are biologically dismantling the old habit.
You are catching the rogue laptop right as the malicious program tries to open, and you are hitting force quit before it can drain the battery.
That's a great analogy. And as you prune away those old connections, you have to build new ones to replace them, which leads us to mental rehearsal.
Sprouting new neural architecture.
Yes. During your meditation, once you are in that coherent brainwave state, you engage the frontal lobe to ask expansive questions. What would it feel like to be completely healthy? What is the greatest expression of myself I can imagine?
The frontal lobe acts as the CEO, looking over the landscape of the brain. It gathers pieces of knowledge you've learned, attributes of people you admire, past memories of success, and it seamlessly combines them to create a new internal blueprint.
And as you passionately, emotionally focus on this new blueprint, you are forcing new nerve cells to fire in new sequences.
And because neurons that fire together wire together, you begin to physically construct new long-term synaptic connections. You're installing the new software hardware.
There is a final case study in the sources that proves the sheer physical power of this mental rehearsal. It's the story of Kathy, a corporate trainer who suffered a massive stroke.
It is a profound demonstration of self-directed neuroplasticity. The stroke severely damaged the language center in the left hemisphere of her brain. The physical hardware was destroyed.
Yes. Her doctors gave her a grim prognosis. They said she would likely never regain the ability to speak fluently.
They looked at the broken hardware and concluded the function was permanently lost. But Kathy understood the principles we've been unpacking today. She refused to accept a predictable future mapped out by her doctors.
Right. She decided to use mental rehearsal to physically bypass the damaged tissue.
Instead of succumbing to the stress and victimization, which would have flooded her system with cortisol and further inhibited brain healing, she went to work.
Every day, she entered a meditative state. And she didn't just passively think about speaking, she passionately, emotionally rehearsed the act of speaking perfectly, articulating every word with joy and gratitude.
She engaged the thinking neocortex, the feeling limbic system, and drove it into the being of the cerebellum. But biologically, what is happening in her brain while she sits in a chair imagining this?
The intense mental rehearsal, coupled with elevated emotion, triggers the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor,
which acts like fertilizer for the brain.
Yes. It stimulates neurogenesis and encourages the growth of new synaptic collaterals. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined event and a physical reality, it responded to her internal rehearsal by actively firing and wiring entirely new neural pathways around the damaged area of her brain.
She literally grew a new language center by rehearsing a future where she could speak. And against all medical odds, she completely regained her speech.
She physically altered the structure of her brain to match the internal state of being she cultivated in meditation. She lived the future in the present moment, and her biology upgraded to reflect it.
It completely inverts the paradigm of how we pursue change. We are conditioned to believe we must manipulate the outside world to fix our internal state. But the science shows that we have to change our internal state so completely, so biologically, that the external world has no choice but to reorganize itself around the new hardware.
It is the ultimate shift from being a victim of your genetic and environmental circumstances to becoming the active creator of your biological destiny.
Okay, let's pull all of this together and summarize the incredible roadmap we've just laid out. We started with the jarring realization that 95% of our daily lives is dictated by subconscious programs.
Right. Our bodies become addicted to the neurochemical rush of our own stress, trapping us in a biological past triggered by our familiar environments.
We examined how trying to escape that trap through external consumption, the new car, the new relationship, only downregulates our dopamine receptors, widens the internal gap, and deepens the dependency.
But we found the biological exit. By shifting our brainwaves out of the survival state of high beta into the coherence of alpha and theta, we can access the operating system.
We can vocalize the truth to sever energetic ties. We can forcefully use the word change to interrupt the default mode network and prune old synapses.
And by utilizing the neocortex, limbic system, and cerebellum, we can passionately rehearse a new reality, literally flooding our brains with BDNF and wiring new circuits before the future even arrives.
And the direct application for you, listening right now, is clear. This science isn't reserved for spontaneous remissions or stroke recoveries. It applies to every thought you have today.
Your daily internal state is actively signaling your genes and wiring your brain. You possess the biological machinery to step out of the predictable timeline of your past and intentionally design your future.
We are not hardwired to be a certain way for the rest of our lives. We are infinitely adaptable, neuroplastic machines capable of profound transformation.
Absolutely.
As we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've just spent this time establishing that your brain physically alters itself, firing and wiring new circuits to reflect whatever future you passionately imagine and emotionally embrace.
Right. Your biology doesn't know the difference between a real external threat and a vividly imagined internal fear.
Which begs the question, what reality are you inadvertently rehearsing right now just by worrying about tomorrow?
That is a critical question to sit with.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you on the next one.